Hello, lovely people. I'm Debs. Welcome back to my channel, Raina Read Stuff. I'm here in the book shack. Bit chilly again, but never mind. It's Sunday. I'm going to do my weekly reading wrap up. Now, I have completed 4 books this week. 2 hard copies, 2 on ebook. Let's start with the ebooks. This one I read for Historithon 2025. I don't usually read books about music. I don't know why, because I like music very much. I found this in my ebook collection, 1971, Never a Dull Moment by David Hepworth. This was so interesting. It takes the premise that 1971 was rock music's golden year, and it goes through the year month by month, it's predominantly talking about albums and album sales. And at the end of each month's chapter, it lists rock albums that have stood the test of time. And in here, we discuss people like, it starts with Paul McCartney going to court and the breakup of the Beatles. And then it just goes through a number of influential bands and influential albums and discusses them in detail and the effect that they had. You've got a lot of big players in here, but you've also got big players who didn't forget where they came from. You have Led Zeppelin, who at the time was the biggest grossing band in the world. And yet, during 1971, Led Zeppelin did a tour of small venues that had helped the band on its rise to success. And one of those venues was Nottingham Boathouse, which, as far as I'm aware, isn't a proper music venue. But anyway, it played gigs all around the country, and the ticket prices were pegged at what they were when the band was struggling. And I think they pretty much underestimated the volume of interest there would be in this. But what a nice thing to do for the fans to say thank you. Other artists featured in here are not just British. We have the Carpenters, we have Carole King, a whole spectrum of artists. It discusses at length David Bowie's first trip to America and the influence that had on him. But altogether, I thoroughly enjoyed this. It was really good, and it was something, it's not remotely out of my comfort zone, but it's something different for me. So 1971, Never a Dull Moment by David Hepworth. Next, we have the other ebook I read anyway. For Historithon and also for DrNovember, The Last Secret Agent. And this is by Pippa Latour with Jude Dobson. And Pippa Latour was a female operative, a member of F section of the Special Operations Executive. And she was dropped into France in the months before D-Day to report back to London on German troop movements and things like that. Pippa Latour, I mean, this book is incredible. The story is incredible. It starts with Pippa being born, and she was born 2 months early on a gangplank / jetty coming off a Belgian ship onto the dock in Durban in South Africa. Her father was French and her mother was English. And to start with, there's an argument about what nationality is she. Is she off the ship? If she was on the ship, she could have been Belgian. Is she off the ship and South African? Is she French because her father is? Is she English because her mother is? Eventually, they plumped for South African. But in the first few years of her life, her family was based in the Belgian Congo. And I think she was only a few months old when there was a witch doctor rebellion and her father was killed. A few years later, her mother was killed. And so she becomes this orphan of family that is spread far and wide. She spends her early years living with an aunt and uncle in the Congo. Then she's moved for schooling, and she has this wild and wonderful upbringing, which eventually leads her to war work at a very young age when war breaks out. And she works initially in Scotland before she undertakes the SOE training and is parachuted into France. Because she was only 23 when she was parachuted into France, and she looked very young, the English had set her up with a background story that she was a 29-year-old secretary. And her French handlers, when she arrived in France, decided there was no way she was going to pass as 29. So instead, they lodged her with an elderly couple in a cottage who had goats and made soap, and had her background papers drawn up that she was a 14-year-old, their granddaughter, and she cycled around the countryside selling soap. And she sold soap to Germans, which is how she found where their troops were. And there was a network of hidden wirelesses, 17 of them, over 100 square kilometres, and she would cycle from one to t'other, selling soap to Germans, finding out where they were, and reporting back to the English. It's just an incredible story. The Last Secret Agent is titled because Pippa Latour survived the war and actually lived until the age of 102. She died in 2023, just before this book came out, but it was absolutely fascinating. Okay, over to the hard copies of books. I finished The Cider House Rules. This is a group read from the World According to John Irving group, and we were meant to read it over 4 weeks. So the last week is this week, and we are meant to be reading chapters 10 and 11. I was quite happy to keep to the schedule until I got to the middle of the book, and then all of a sudden the pace picked up and I flew through it. So I finished it, as have other people. I'm not going to talk about the whole book because there are still people reading it. I will just say this was my first John Irving, and I thought it was fabulous. It deals with themes like illegal abortion. It deals with people not knowing who or where their parents are. The characters in here are just so vivid and flawed. And I thought this book was fabulous. Now, the group is going on to read Queen Esther starting on the 1st of December. So if anyone wants to join in with that, I'll put the details down below. I will definitely go on to read more John Irving. I've discovered I have The World According to Garp in hard copy. I've got Queen Esther on Audible because it came with my subscription and I didn't want to spend £16 on a hard copy. But then I have several others as well. I have A Prayer for Owen Meany, which, judging from the group chat, is a number of people's favourite. I have Something About a Chairlift. I've got several, and I will certainly be reading more John Irving next year. Finally, Ivanhoe. Do you like this little collection of... I've got a set of these. I don't know how many I've got. And I sort of want to read the rest of them now. I might do a quick video showing you what's in them, and you can tell me which ones I ought to read first. Anyway, Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott, group read, led by Greg at Ghost Riders in the Sky. And this is an historical novel. So we are looking back at the time of King John and Richard I. It's, again, I meant to be reading the end of it this week, so I can't tell you the whole plot. But one of the things I absolutely loved about it is that it is predominantly set in and around this area, and that's the East Midlands in England, for those of you who don't know. And we are talking about castles that I visited, which I also like. But the other thing I really, really enjoyed was the politics of the day. And we have King John. He's not a nice person, really. You have some beautiful descriptions of jousts and tournaments and where people sit according to their rankings, and what the Normans thought of the Saxons and the Saxons thought of the Normans, and what everybody thought of the Jews. I can't say that I was absolutely happy with the end of this book. I was hoping perhaps for a slightly different ending, but it's so well written and the characters really spring to life in front of you. It features Robin Hood, Alan a Dale, and Friar Tuck. We don't have Little John, I'm afraid. He's in Scotland doing something else. So what's not to like? Thought this was fabulous. So those are my 4 books. Now, according to my list of Read What You Own, which, as you will know, I restarted because Alan at Alan's Reads made me buy a book. He's tried to do it again this week, but I'm not having any of it this time around. I'm not falling for his games twice. Ivanhoe was my 8th book for Read What You Own. And because both the Cider House Rules and Ivanhoe were quite chunky, my page count is now up to 2,806, which puts me on the... What does that put me on? 8. 11. Is that right? if you judge the average number of pages, which is what they do for this challenge, if you judge the average number of pages for a book to be 250, there's 8 of those in 2,000 pages and another 3. So yeah, 11 books according to my page count, but 8 books according to the books that I've actually read. Now, while we're here, I'm just going to quickly show you a couple of things that I stole, the latest thefts from my father's library. As you know, if you've been here before, my father died about 8 years ago and has this wonderful library that nobody else in the family is interested in. So I have decided that the entire collection is mine, and I randomly steal some every time I go down. These I stole while going down to visit the family before November the 5th. So these count if I want to read them for Read What You Own. I have here a lovely old copy of The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells, which I have actually never read. So that's a good one. I also have a collection of Daphne du Maurier books. This is the Daphne du Maurier Omnibus, which appears to have been taken from a high school. And this includes Rebecca, which I have read, and Jamaica Inn and Frenchman's Creek, which I haven't. And then I found this. This little tatty old thing is called The Book of Escapes and Hurried Journeys, and it's by John Buchan. It's a first edition of the book that was published in 1925, so it's 100 years old. And this includes things like the escape of King Charles after Worcester, the flight of Lieutenants Parer and Mackintosh across the world, Lord Nithsdale's escape, Sir Robert Carey's ride to Edinburgh. It looks like good fun. Plenty in there to get my teeth into. So that's my week. Thoroughly enjoyed all of the books that I've read this week. I have written myself a list of books that I have really got to read before the end of the year, and I shall try and get on with some of those this week, I think, as I finish both the group reads. I hope you've had a lovely reading week. Let me know what you've been reading, and have a wonderful week to come. Thank you very much for stopping by. It's always lovely to see you, and I will speak to you very soon. Bye for now.